Again, this is the SEDC webcast, and today's episode is Winning Mindshare, the PR Advantage to Securing Site Selection Deals. So we're really thrilled to discuss how to best broadcast the advantages and opportunities in our communities, and also how to elevate your communications efforts to better position yourself with enterprise, executives, media, and your community, as well as site selectors as well. So leading the charge today are our friends from Violet PR, which is a great member of SEDC. They are also, more importantly, an award-winning PR boutique firm working all over the country, including here in the American South, and they specialize in economic development. So with us here today is April Mason. She is the president and founder of Violet PR, and expert in economic and real estate development. And she's led public relations campaigns for states including New Jersey, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Georgia, North Carolina, as well as metros like Newark, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Savannah, Kansas City, and so many other great places as well. And she's orchestrated hundreds of media interviews for governors, mayors, CEOs, industry leaders, economic developers, and all the while elevating the profiles of cities and states and developments and economic development organizations. So thank you, April, for being here. And we also have Nicole Marshall, who is the vice president of Violet PR. She will be at the SEDC YPCon with us in the Dallas area in just a few days. So she's also one of the nation's leading pros who has 17 years in the business and has helped her clients place great stories and get coverage in top tier media outlets such as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, CNBC, CNN, Forbes, TechCrunch, CBS News, and a bunch of international outlets as well that I would say if I could pronounce them. So we certainly appreciate Nicole's great work, and let me encourage you to go to Violet PR's website at violetpr.com to further explore the bios of our great speakers. So before I hand it over, let me say this is recorded. It will live on our website, so you can always go back and reference that as our speakers move through their presentations too. Don't pop questions in the chat. They may or may not get to those on subsequent slides, but if not, at the end we can turn our cameras on and have a good family style chat. So with that said, April and Nicole, thank you. The floor is yours, and I'll turn it to April.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. We're so excited to continue our longstanding partnership with SEDC and present today to you all. Our presentation today is really just talking about the importance of PR to attracting site selection deals to your community. This is really that top of the funnel, getting interest in your community, shaping impressions, that kind of thing. So Nicole and I love talking about this. So we're just going to quickly introduce ourselves, which Matt already gave a great summary. Just give a little background on how PR will help you all attract businesses. Nicole's then going to take it into a perception analysis conversation. How do you determine what the perception already is of your community, and then how do we influence that? And then from there, we'll show you guys some tactics that have been working really well for our clients. And then we'll have a little time for Q&A at the end. So as Matt mentioned, I'm the president and founder of Violet PR. We are about 16 full-time people now. Our headquarters is just outside New York City in Montclair, New Jersey. But I'm originally from Oklahoma City and have worked in Kansas City for the Area Development Council for a number of years before I came to the Northeast. And Nicole, I'll let you just say hello.
Yeah, hello, Nicole Marshall here. I'm actually a Southerner myself, born and raised in the New Orleans metro area in Louisiana. So glad to hear there's some Louisiana folks here on the line. But love and have worked in economic development for at least 12 to 15 years in my career, but graduated from PR a long time before that as well, working in the urban development and kind of real estate development space as well, telling stories and getting earned media coverage.
So as I mentioned, and I think Matt gave a really nice intro, Violet PR is really the only firm that we know of that specializes in economic development, public relations. Our focus is really on generating earned media. And we'll talk about some examples later in the presentation, but really getting our clients who are all over the country in the news in terms of news stories, whether it's Wall Street Journal, Site Selection Magazine, everything in between. So we love doing that and love working with communities around the country. And this is just a quick highlight reel of some of the broadcast coverage that we've obtained for clients.
Behind me is Amazon HQ2.
Our goal is to make the first wearable cortisol sensor to measure and manage stress levels all day, every day.
Wouldn't a hectic airport be the ideal place for a sensory room? Pittsburgh said yes.
We didn't realize how underserved the population was, and now we know, and we want to make a difference.
Visitors, artists will be able to stay here.
Thanks to its Goldilocks location amid the Great Lakes, Buffalo has never reached 100 degrees.
We're really excited to have you here today and for the opportunity to showcase exciting and innovative things happening in Kansas City in the tech space.
That's our short sizzle reel. Some of the clients we're working with today that you all will relate to in the South include the states of Oklahoma and Georgia, the Kansas City Area Development Council, as well as Frisco, Texas, which is a relatively new client. They're one of the fastest growing communities in Texas. We also just did a project for Fort Worth, Texas, and we work on an ongoing basis with the state of North Carolina and Savannah, Georgia, as well as a number of others here on this list. And as I mentioned, our role is really to get our clients into the top tier media. Here are some of those, everything from Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Bloomberg. We're talking to these reporters on a daily basis and really working to find out, what are they covering and how can we get our clients covered in those news stories, which is a lot of fun. And then we also, for many clients, are working to get them into niche outlets that cover their target industries. So whether that's supply chain logistics, technology, biotechnology, increasingly power and energy are becoming a huge focus. We know the writers and the publications that cover those niches, and often arrange for press visits for those journalists to go visit communities around the country as well, which is fun. So why is PR important to business attraction? I've got a couple of stats here, and you guys will probably be familiar with this one from Site Selection Magazine. I think they update this every few years. So the most recent one was 2023. There were 5,000 corporate facility project announcements the year prior, and over 30,000 communities competing for those investments. So how do we position ourselves as a community to be top of mind to potentially win one of these projects? Well, one of those great ways is earned media or public relations. And earned media, as I'm sure most of you know, that's when a news reporter writes a story about you. Paid media is obviously when you're paying for the story. So earned media certainly carries some risks in that we can't control the overall outcome of the story, but we can definitely shape the story. And the benefit is it really carries so much more weight than an ad or a direct marketing piece. A survey by Development Counselors International, they do this every 3 years. It's their winning strategy survey. They found that 64% of US executives say that media coverage shapes how they perceive communities. And they rank that much higher than other marketing tools. And half of global executives consider earned media one of the most credible sources for information about US locations. So it's one thing for you to say something great about your community, your website can look wonderful, but if you're not also getting earned media coverage, that third-party credibility, I think you're going to miss out on some opportunities. AI is now making earned media coverage even more important. Why is that? So right now, and this number has to be higher now, I feel like these numbers are from late 2024, 61% of executives are using generative AI tools to do preliminary business research. I feel like I'm using it almost daily, and I would guess most of you are as well. And the nice thing about it is that AI will amplify content that they deem authoritative. And that means earned media, that means news stories. So I've done searches on communities that we've represented, and it often pulls up content that we've sent to journalists, and journalists have written articles. It might be the article could be 2 to 3 years old, but it often will still come up in AI summaries, whether that's a Google summary or ChatGPT or one of these other tools here. They're saying by 2027, 1/3 of all online searches will be conducted through AI assistance. So those AI tools are scraping news coverage for the content that they're giving people. And so I like this little chart because it kind of shows, media coverage was important pre-AI, and that was when we were thinking about it more in terms of SEO, search engine optimization. So we were thinking of it as, the more news stories you have linking back to your website, the more traffic your site would get. So every news story, helped with that. It helped with the credibility that we've discussed. But it still reached more of a limited outlet readership. So if you got a story in Manufacturing Today, for example, and it had 30,000 readers, those 30,000 people would see it, but maybe not more than that, unless you were doing a great job of circulating the story on social media and your website. Today, those stories have the opportunity to be seen by tens of thousands more people. And the media coverage is fueling the AI training data that's happening. The other thing that AI will do is prioritize reputable sources over sources that, over your own website, perhaps. So we're really now doing a lot of talking, and I talked to Matt about this on our podcast recently, but it's really the AIO era, artificial intelligence optimization now, in addition to SEO, is still being important.
Okay,
so Nicole,
I can jump.
I'll turn it to you.
Awesome. Thanks, April. I will go ahead and jump into the idea of where we might begin. So obviously in all of your communities, you are doing some level of PR work at this point. But I think when you consider the idea of a really proactive media outreach and national or international media relations campaign, it can sometimes feel daunting about what you might want to focus on, or which topics or which key messages are really the ones that you want to focus on delivering. And I think, as April was mentioning, the AIO era and our in general, our digital era, it's becoming more and more possible to do that in an informed way and to use data to back you up as you develop your pathway to securing more earned coverage. So what I'm showing you is kind of a graphic that was created as a result of a survey. Surveys are one way that we can get insights into perceptions of our market. Surveys have been conducted for a long time in economic development. We all know how painfully hard they can be to do, and how sometimes it can almost feel like we're taxing audiences or creating work for them. But it can be really meaningful in real time in the way that you get insights about your place before you decide what to go out with in terms of a promotional message. I like this graphic because it also showcases the importance and the access that we have to very regionalized information today. So specifically, as we think about the perception of New York, from Western Europe, you see that there's a focus and understanding of New York as being a place full of skyscrapers, whereas if you look across into Asia, there might be more of a focus or a perception of the tourism elements of New York City. Or these issues where other parts of the world are perceiving New York as busy. So all of that information can then help you develop much more targeted pitches. And as you're reaching out to international media, you have the opportunity to really focus on what it is that you're trying to change about their mind as it regards your place. So this survey helped deliver that level of information. There's other routes to get there as well. This is another example of that kind of information that you can study from a perception standpoint. We've all used word clouds at various points in our career. But what this does is it helps you notice the things that are missing. And if you're spending your time as an economic development organization trying to highlight a particular industry and wanting your place to be known as an epicenter of that industry, and you're not seeing that industry in this word cloud, then that means there's probably a gap already that you're up against, and you're trying to help fill that gap by associating that industry with your place. So just a couple of points to kind of highlight here. Those gaps are obviously a potential place where we have risk. The more that people don't understand that our place is already robustly full of that particular industry or sector, then the more that they might not put you into their consideration set from a site selection standpoint. Additionally, if you do a competitive assessment of other cities and that word is showing up, chances are they're already making that short list and you might not be. So you can very quickly get an understanding through these kind of tools as to what markets are already perceived as the epicenter of that particular topic. For instance, one industry that we're seeing a lot in the news these days is life sciences. Life sciences has long been believed to be based in San Diego or in Boston or New Jersey as kind of epicenters of life sciences. But there are major pockets in this country that are growing rapidly to even surpass those markets. And so they know that they're working hard to fight against that existing perception that those industries live somewhere else. Another point about this kind of level of study and perception analysis is that you can find keywords that you need to specifically target against. So in New York City, you see expensive showing up here in the middle. That's a great perception that has long stood in New York City, but that's one that if I were representing New York City, I would spend a lot of time trying to highlight great quality of life and cost of living kind of benefits and key messages to help combat that perception, so that if nothing else, you can at least shrink the presence of that word in this sort of awareness or perception study. And then in today's world, there are other pathways towards kind of securing and analyzing perception information about your place, from various different kind of focus group studies. You can do surveys, you can do all sorts of other things from word of mouth sort of assessments, but we now have this great technology available to us too. So these are just some examples of the platforms that do perception analysis work that can be subscribed to even on your own. We often offer this as a part of our work with our clients, but you can even have an ongoing membership with some baseline information always being monitored about your place. And that can really allow you, even as an in-house team, to keep an eye on the perceptions that you need to be combating, even when you're going into business development meetings or you're working through your other marketing channels as well. This type of digital perception study work can really just start to inform everything you do in a better way, in an actually pretty affordable way too. So I highlighted one here. Brand24 is just one platform that is pretty affordable for those of you who would like to kind of start establishing that baseline information for your place. I would recommend giving them a try. You can set up certain keywords, or you can look for you can set up searches for certain industries within your market as well, and start to monitor and analyze what the messages are that are coming out in those particular topical areas. And then these are just some other examples of the ways that we might all be conducting perception analyses on an existing basis, or that we maybe have done in the past in economic development. But these surveys are huge. They've long been a very key aspect of how we are analyzing our market's perception on a national and international basis. Benchmarking, you might be doing this kind of work for your business development purposes, but this also can be hugely valuable for your public relations campaigns as well.
All right, so we're going to talk about a few tactics here that have been working well for our clients. So one tactic is putting your news out on PR Newswire. And this may sound very, very basic and very old school, because newswires have been around for decades and decades. But we have found it's a great use of dollars. It's roughly $4.99 for a news release on the wire, and you can include an image of your community. And the nice thing is, even PR Newswire, even though it's not a technically a third-party outlet, it is indexed similarly to a news site on many of the AI summaries. So we did 2 news releases this summer for Baltimore, one talking about the housing redevelopment program and one talking about the historic waterfront transformation, both which have billions of dollars going into them. We generated a number of news stories ranging from, top tier like the New York Times to very, very niche like a Housing Wire, which reached a great audience on their own. But then if you go to the next slide, these are 2 AI summaries, and these are just Google summaries. They came from my search. I asked Google, I just typed in Baltimore waterfront redevelopment, and the summary spits out, the AI overview on the left, spits out all the content from our PR Newswire release, which is amazing. And then on the right side, you'll see some of the news stories that we placed about the waterfront redevelopment. Same thing on the housing side. I asked it about Baltimore housing redevelopment, spits out a lot of the content that we put out, and then includes links to some of the news stories like multi-housing news, which again might not have gotten an initial readership that was so significant, but now it's available on search. So pretty cool way to see immediate shifts, I think, in some of the narrative around Baltimore. From there, another tactic we love to use to get press is newsjacking. So this is a term that was coined over a decade ago, but it was something that PR people have been doing for a long, long time. And it's basically taking the news of the day and trying to insert your community into that news. So our client in Topeka, Kansas, they had been concerned about some of the tariffs and the trade relationships with Canada. And so they decided to sort of take this into their own hands and take a trip up to Ottawa and meet with some legislators there, meet with some heads of state, as well as Chamber of Commerce folks. So we were able to pitch this successfully to a number of national media outlets in Canada, talking about how Topeka is still excited to work with Canada and find relationships and avoid kind of some of the downsides of the challenges nationally with the federal government. So this got a ton of coverage. And yes, this next slide, you'll be able to see, Kansas businesses hit by the trade war are wooing Canadian customers in the Globe and Mail. And this story was syndicated across Canada. So even though a lot of Canadians, when I've been to Canada the last several months, they're a little bit wary of Americans right now. Canada was able to see that Kansas is really making a concerted effort. And I know since our clients in Topeka have been to Canada, a number of other communities across the country have been to Canada. Probably some of you listening today have been. But the nice thing in this case, I think we were able to get so much press in this instance because Topeka was one of the early visitors to Canada, and we just did a short pitch really capitalizing on that. Thought leadership is another great way to get your news out, especially if you don't have an immediate news hook. One of our clients is the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and they're a real estate entity in a sense in that they lease space to thousands of small businesses in New York. But they also are an economic development engine because they've got a lot of training programs, workforce development programs, education programs. And they're home to a number of companies doing really cool things in, whether it's the tech AI space or other spaces. And they've really become, they like to call it, the CEO, Lindsay Green, likes to call it a living lab. Because they're based in New York City and they can test all kinds of products and tools on the population here. So that has become our pitch. She can't necessarily make announcements for the companies because there's so many companies and they're doing, cool different things all the time. But her role as the CEO is really to talk about the mission of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And so we've positioned her as a thought leader on this subject of an urban manufacturing center, urban tech hub. And that has generated some really great news stories in Bloomberg, Chief Executive, and the business journals. But I think to get these types of stories, it's important to come up with a narrative about your community that, again, ties into some trends. In this case, the trends are technology, they're advanced manufacturing, doing manufacturing here in the US, and then also have a chief executive that's willing to put in the time to do these interviews. Most of these were either Zoom or a couple were in person. Some were actually just Q&A by email. That's actually the easiest thing for the executive because the PR team really puts a lot of the responses together. But you do have to have an executive that will be willing to take the time and put themselves out there, do these interviews. And here we have an example of Lindsay speaking to Bloomberg.
Talk about manufacturing in the context of what's happening in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, because you are a big believer that manufacturing needs to happen in cities.
It does. It needs to happen all over the country. And we believe that there's a slice of it that always makes sense to happen in urban settings. And that's what the Navy Yard has been about since the Navy started. And it's really about businesses who capitalize on the talent that is here in New York in particular. And that's both shop floor workers and talented engineers of different types, and a proximity to their customer base. That's big corporations that are based here, the 8.5 million consumers. Just being in a big metropolis is a great place to see and feel the applicability of whatever it is that you make.
That was great. We were also able to provide the journalists, the news editors in advance with some of these images. So anytime you do broadcasts, that's always helpful.
Talk about manufacturing.
Awesome. Well, I can jump in next with another tactic. So media tours. This is an approach that we are able to provide for clients, and some clients do this perfectly on their own too. But in general, what we call a media tour is at least about a day of media intensive appointments. So this can be added on, especially for economic developers, when you all are in a market for a trade show, for instance. So at Select USA, when you're in DC, you can add some media to your focus at Select USA. Oftentimes New York is the epicenter, obviously that's why we're based there. And also, it just has access to a lot of broadcast studios in a way that many other urban markets won't be able to provide. But media tours are something where you can have a sort of strategic opportunity to really just to deliver a flood of positive press coverage around a certain topic. So we spend time talking with the client organization and developing what is that pitch that's going to land, and what is the angle that's really got some timeliness that can make it reach the news audience in an effective way. And then lining up interviews in person. And these interviews can sometimes be backgrounders, more informational in nature and more about education and perception shifting. So you can have a meeting in a boardroom where you're trying to help several reporters at an outlet understand more about your place. You also might have a broadcast interview live on the air tied to your visit where you're specifically talking about the message that you're there to promote. So we recently did one of these for Atlanta, a lovely southern city. And really we're focusing on the World Cup and the upcoming World Cup, as well as other aspects of what's happening in Atlanta's growth. So they were fighting some perception challenges around the same things that a lot of cities fight: traffic and growth and things feeling too expensive, or those types of issues. And we focused on a lot of the positive messaging around what's going on in terms of Atlanta's growth and what that really means for residents and businesses who choose to locate in Atlanta in terms of access to opportunity. So there were some great segments and placements that came out of this visit, and then also great long-term relationships for Atlanta. So those are reporters that they now can go back to on an ongoing basis when they have more news announcements to share for many months ahead, because of that, the value of that in-person relationship in terms of really staying in touch with those outlets as well. And I'll just show a quick segment here of Katie Kirkpatrick. She's the CEO of the Metro Atlanta Chamber. She was one of the spokespeople that Atlanta brought for this New York City media tour. And she also did a great job talking in this segment with Bloomberg that thought you would enjoy watching.
Our next guest charged with attracting businesses to Atlanta, keeping them there, and working with policymakers to make the climate attractive to capital. Katie Kirkpatrick is president and CEO of the Metro Atlanta Chamber. It represents businesses, colleges, and universities, nonprofits, too, across the greater Atlanta area. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio.
We moved from one central business district to a second one to about 8 now, and they're all over the region. And that allows you to live, work, and play close to one central location.
So let's talk about live, work, and play.
So there's a good example of Katie kind of tackling that topic around growth and really helping make it feel more accessible and provide that sort of quality of life message that maybe she faces when talking about Atlanta with business prospects.
Our next guest.
Another example of a tactic that we often utilize for securing positive news about a place is that in-market press visit. So really, sometimes there's just nothing that's more valuable than bringing a reporter directly to see your city or your region or your county in person. This is especially valuable, we find, with members of the foreign media who maybe are new to the U.S. or they've never been outside of the major metropolises in the U.S. Can be great to bring them to your market if it's a target country for FDI for your place. But it's also really great for trade media. We find that trade reporters like to get a sense of stuff happening in person. And this example here was specific for our client in Buffalo, New York. Buffalo being close to the border with Canada, they often are covered or relevant in the Canadian press, and they specifically get a lot of coverage and pickup from the Globe and Mail. So we targeted a reporter for a personal visit to Buffalo to make sure that this reporter had a more personal understanding of Buffalo and got a sense of the positive things happening in the market and also seeing parts of the place in person. So it resulted in a great long form piece in the Globe and Mail. And then also it influenced his coverage in the future as well. So we've seen other stories land with this reporter where he now has a little bit more of a personal positive experience and relationship to Buffalo. And you can kind of find that in the tone of the coverage that we've seen since. So it's another one of those where you might invest some money and some time to host them, but you have long-term dividends for that in terms of the potential influence of the nature of the future coverage too. Additionally, we do these with groups where we bring multiple reporters at one time to a market. This was one that I personally was on earlier this year in North Carolina with several trade reporters in the life sciences space. So North Carolina has a huge growing cluster of life sciences companies developing their production facilities and manufacturing facilities in the state. And a lot of reporters were excited to have the chance to kind of see and touch and feel those facilities in person and see what those production lines look like, especially as we kind of are focused on bringing some of that production and that the biotech supply chain kind of back to the U.S. So these reporters were fantastic. They were taken all over the state to several different pockets of the state to tell a statewide story. And we've seen a tremendous amount of coverage land from each of them since that time. And in the long run, again, you get more positive tone into the stories because they have a little bit more of a personal positive memory attached with that place as well. So a really good investment to make the time and space to have them in person and set up those tours and interviews for them while they're on the ground. Additionally, we call this tactic, general elevation of ecosystems. So a lot of clients come to us because they find it so frustrating that their market is just that nobody seems to know how robust their particular industry is in their market. In Switzerland, for instance, Switzerland has a lot of strong perceptions in the U.S. as a great tourism destination or has a lot of strong perceptions for finance. But they, for their future and their economic development pathway, they really want to focus on technology and the sort of deep tech sectors like AI, quantum computing, robotics, a lot of the more very specific and technical fields that are growing in the tech space. So they've hired us to work for them here, helping get positive press in the U.S. for those deep tech narrative. So we work with them to help highlight specific companies that are standout companies that are growing, to highlight the sort of cross-country investments that are happening where US companies are choosing to expand into Switzerland, and kind of get that message into the national and international press so that others will consider expanding into Switzerland as well. And for them, their argument is strongly around their talent ecosystem and the intellectual kind of education background that they offer there. And so we spend a lot of time understanding that, finding data related to that, using kind of timely moments, but really helping elevate this other aspect of Switzerland that maybe is a little less known. So we do this for cities and states all the time, where they're trying to bring up a certain pillar, or they see a certain industry gaining momentum, and they're seeing more site selection opportunities in that particular space, but they're fighting that their location just does not have the reputation for being known in that growing sector. So really, sector focused pitching can be hugely valuable to your business development pipeline process. And then just to close on some tactics, every earned media story has life well beyond just the day that it hits. And we spend a lot of time making sure that economic development organizations are using those placements on multiple channels. So whether that's posting it on their website or featuring it in a major way, or even amplifying it in state or in the local market media as well, is another great way to help get attention for that big placement when it does land. If you're covered in the Wall Street Journal, your local business journal might like to know that and might be interested in talking about that. Highlighting these stories, obviously, in email and social media channels. Again, more obvious kind of digital tie-ins, but that content really becomes something that has a lot of life and legs for a long time after the day that it actually runs. Especially when they get the key messages just right, and they're really, your spokesperson nails it on your quotes, and you have the best possible headline. Those stories can be something that you can use for many years to come even. And with that, I think we can pass it to Matt to help us field kind of some questions and answers with the rest of our time we have here today, and happy to just provide and brainstorm a little more thinking around the topic.
Well, thank you, Nicole and April. I thought this was fantastic. We have a little bit of time left here, so for those that are with us live, we would love to hear your comments about strategies that you've deployed successfully, or ask some questions of Nicole and April while we have a few minutes. Okay, last call here for those live. Thank you, Kristen. Okay, we have one from Louisiana here. Let me see if I can pull the chat up. This may be a good comment. We have a new CEO who is taking a new approach with our EDO. We're having a feature in a local magazine next month. Where could we distribute this for best reach?
Well, hopefully the feature will also appear online. And in that case, definitely sharing on all your social media channels, tagging the reporter, thanking the reporter. Yes, I see yes here on in the chat. I always like to do that on LinkedIn, thanks to X reporter tagging them, and this publication tagging the publication, tagging anybody else who's mentioned in the article, any companies in your community, to make sure they're aware of it. From there, you also will want to include it in e-blasts. You'll want to put it on your website if you can. Nicole, there might be other thoughts you have, but definitely just make sure as many people see this story as possible.
Yeah, and I would say, taking a local story and using it as a way to help tell the story to other reporters outside of your market is definitely a possible pathway, especially when it's a new hire change or a promotion, those sort of personnel things. I would say you might also specifically target the economic development trade press. I know Dane Carlson with the Econ Dev Show, he always loves a new hire sort of thing, and he could offer you maybe a podcast interview. There's also Civmetrics does a lot of promotion coverage in their newsletters, so you can get additional legs by sharing that local piece, or your press release that you've developed too. So Lots of other ways to take it once you get that local piece. And depending on how well it tells a really deep dive story, you might even also find some other thought leadership angles that come out of that too, that you could pitch for more national media.
Yeah, and one other thought I had is definitely make sure you pitch the magazine story to your local TV channels and radio, because sometimes they will follow print and print and online now. So I think I wouldn't discount that opportunity, that they see the credibility in that story, and then maybe, hey, this is somebody we need to talk to.
All right, great question, Kristen. Thanks for that. Do we have any more before we break? Let me give a shout out to April, who joined the SEDC podcast maybe a month or so ago. We spent about an hour digging into all of the weeds of public relations and more, and had a lot of fun. So give that a listen for a little bit more PR content. You can find that on our website or anywhere that you get your podcasts, if you just search the SEDC podcast. So if there are no final questions or comments, that will conclude our event today. We so appreciate April and Nicole and Violet PR for all that you do, your membership in SEDC, and your investment and friendship as well. The next opportunity that we have will be a new member orientation that will be tomorrow for our new members. And also we have about 10 more webcasts, all free, that will be deployed throughout the next few weeks. You can find that information on sedc.org. So that concludes this webcast. Thanks to the team here and to everyone watching online. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Great job.